given us this absolutely wonderful product and this wonderful example and learning tool that we could not do on our own.
If I could just speak to that quickly, Matt came up with the idea right after Corey Haim's death, and he'd lived in Hollywood for 10 years, and my day job as a hedge fund manager, very skeptical, said, you can't make a movie around those two guys. Matt said, look, just do a research budget with Disarming. Don't shoot a single roll of film, but do a full serious research budget. Trust me, there'll be enough you'll want to make a movie. And sure enough, about 4 or 5 months later, after private investigator work and all those other things, Michael Hara and many other names with credible information and multiple accusers, Evans' situation and the total miscarriage of justice, and many other things. I mean, how could you sit at my desk and not write the check to get that exposed? I couldn't believe somebody hadn't done that before. There's literally 5 to 10 times the amount of credible research which Disarming uncovered. Unfortunately, being in this film is not exactly a wonderful role. Try to imagine if you were a victim of child sex abuse. I certainly can't if you were a survivor. And somebody comes to you and says, we'd like to make a documentary film. It's never been done before. We're not going to black out your face. We're going to give your name and last initial, but everybody's really going to find out who you are. We're not going to hide your voice. You're going to need to name your accuser, and you're going to be very specific and have documentation and all that sort of thing. And by the way, you're not going to get paid a dime. Does that sound like a very appealing role? So we were very fortunate to have several survivors, such as Evan, who did have that strength and courage to come forward and make this happen.
I want you guys to address one of the criticisms of the film. There have been, I've noticed in preparation for tonight, several published reports that attack the credibility of one of the key figures in the Den story, Michael Egan. He, of course, leveled accusations about a very prominent director, Bryan Singer. He's since withdrawn his lawsuit. Does that undermine the credibility of this film in your mind?
Well, you have two things. You have the film itself. You have but only one of the subjects in the film. And then you have that subject where he's in the film and the rest of his life. Where he is in the film, he is talking about Den. That's a court case that he won with 2 other individuals. I don't think any reasonable person could question that. What he did in his life outside afterwards is not in the film. So I don't reasonably see how someone could attract the credibility of the entire film based on Mike Egan's 2014 issues. But frankly, I think we got incredibly lucky at An Open Secret. When you consider the ravages that child sex abuse, one of the worst scourges of humanity, could have an effect on someone, and that we had several participants, but one of those participants, but that's the worst thing that you could say about one of them, I think we got an amazingly recovered group and got very lucky. Most victims are nowhere near along the lines of recovery as An Open Secret victims are.
Just to add on to that, and to tie back to how many victims there were, I know we've sort of mentioned it, but our organization gave Disarming drawers and drawers. I lost track of how many drawers of information they had that we had gathered over 10 years prior to filming. We absolutely believe every word that is in this film, based on 10 years of research. This is just a little picture of a few victims. There was so much more. And Mike Egan is, every word he says in the film is true. As Gabe just mentioned, we have to look at all the child actors we've ever seen. And when you hear about them on TV and say, child actor got bad, their evil stage parents must have done something horrible, maybe now everyone in this room will go, maybe something else was going on for that kid. Maybe it isn't just that they're drug addict, crazy person, maybe something happened to them. Because I think that's the reality of most of the cases you hear about in the news.
That's a great point. Did anyone have any questions of their own before I continue? Why don't you come up? Or shout. Just shout. It's a small room.
Yeah.
How do you feel about your cousin still being hidden by Marty?
Well, that's frustrating. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, he could have been a victim himself, or he was not, and I don't know.
Did you ever talk about it?
Yeah, we have, but he
Doesn't
said-
want to come forward.
right. So
Got it.
But Marty, is Marty managing kids now?
I don't know. I think he is, but I know that my cousin and him had an organization or a film company called Two Wise Guys Productions, because it was a coincidence that they had the same last name, and they called it Two Wise Guys, and there were videos on YouTube until about 2 weeks ago with them, and I took pictures of it, so.
Dawn, you bring up a very important point about Marty Weiss, and that is, let's not forget not only about Brian Peck, but about the value that you all contribute by coming to the theater and keeping this in theaters. 3 weeks after Cannes, the Daily Mail, large United Kingdom paper, published a story about Brian Peck in depth on June 8th, and took the photographs and showed where he worked and explained exactly what the loopholes are in the regulations. That essentially, the state of California does not put a bubble wrap around children's workplaces like they do schools. Very simply, he can work in the same building, he can be surrounded by children, as long as he's not working with them one-on-one. Clearly, we don't feel that's acceptable as a society. But by you all supporting the film, asking friends to support the film, keeping this topic discussed, there's something very important called the Savile effect, and that's why the UK papers were so onto this. Jimmy Savile, for those of you who don't know, was about a top 50 A-lister in the United Kingdom, literally for decades. And just after he died, a couple of years ago, it came out that he did dozens, if not hundreds, of horrific things, which I won't even get into. Point being, a lawyer has made this study that the percentage increase in reports of child sex abuse to Scotland Yard in a country of over 60 million people has increased over 30% in just 2 years. So you all can be a part of the Savile effect in the United States. Discussion leads to results.